it seems to me that one big change that has happened is the opening up of India and China. So, which has actually added 2.5 billion people in the market. So, both supply side and demand side. It's a huge change in how business happens. So, it's not just high tech, but also across the spectrum. So, you can sell French cheese in India, where people have people in general have no idea how to distinguish different kinds of cheese, but you'll still find a small percentage, which is actually a large number of people who are willing to pay for French cheese. So this is, I think, a significant change overall. Although I agree that the height of globalization is a bit exaggerated. Most of the trade happens within regions, but still, I think the opening up of India and China is a big uh, phenomenon.
Are emerging economies then becoming better, presenting more opportunities then for entrepreneurs?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I thought, Matthieu.
Yeah.
So you chose to launch your business in China. What's your story?
My story was I was studying in Peking University with a dual degree with ESSEC, and I did an Excel plus and minus starting a business in France or in China, and finally I chose France. The reason being the cost will be lower. One point, but the second point is that I thought that for myself, if I fail, even if I fail, I would have won something. I would have won to learn more about China, to learn the language, and so on. So it was like minimizing the risk for me to start a business outside France, because I would get something from it. About what we discussed just before about technological changes, that we can start a business with very few resources. That actually is a bet from Y Combinator, where they can put like $50,000 in a company just to develop a product, and then with the social networks, they try. The go-to-market is very easy; doesn't cost a lot. So that's what also some people bet on in China. And you see some VC or angel investors and funding some companies in China. Most of them are Chinese. We have been funded by Kima Ventures, which is a fund created by Xavier Niel and Jeremy Berebi. And they typically put around $100,000 in companies at a very, very early stage, as soon as you have some sales. So it's it's easy to start with low capital now because the go-to-market is easy. But one thing is that when we talk about globalization, when I look at China, I am with a client currently introducing baby food in China. It's so complicated. You need licenses. The accounting is different. So I think globalization, yeah, we exchange a lot, but we have still a lot of barriers, and the world is not that flat. So just to tell you my point of view from China. Yeah.
I have some comments about founding a company in France, because I'm currently fundraising for two incubation that is happening into the fund that I manage. And basically, we decided to launch one in France, and for the second one we are thinking of launching it in the UK, because basically we are seeing all the capital of Europe being managed by UK investors later on. There is a lot of capital in England right now that is looking for targets. And there is very few good entrepreneurs in England. There is a lot of good entrepreneurs in England, sorry, but there is all the English funds are looking at France to deploy their capital. But the problem they have is like they have difficulties to deal with with French administration, French legal systems, etc. So that restrains the capital to be deployed in France. So I would, as an advice for young entrepreneurs who want to launch their own startups, I would say go to England. It's 2 hours away from Gare du Nord, and you have access to lots of capital there. And when you talk with VC investors in France, they are very depressed because of the fact that lots of asset management companies don't want to invest in VC in France. There is this new rule of 75% of taxes for the partners of the funds. So lots of teams want to go and move to London. So I think for the sake of finding money to finance your innovation, you're better off to be in London.
Yeah. Anyone else have any comments about funding? About Perrine, maybe?
I think you have other kind of funding solution which are emerging now in France, like equity fund. You know, if you assess the social impact of your business, you have access to other kind of funds, and maybe France is not the right country to raise a lot of money, but for social business, for social entrepreneurship, for citizen engaged new business. You have lots of funding solutions emerging, and especially I know about an equity fund called Citizen Capital, and they're not only taking into account economic performance, but also manager engagement. Like if you have employee participation in your capital, if your place to work is a great place to work, and lots of criteria. And I think that's a good trend for funding in France to take into account this kind of criteria, and this fits young entrepreneurs' emerging motivation to give meaning to their jobs. I see lots of young entrepreneurs who start up a business not only to get richer and richer, but also to give meaning to their job, because they can't find this kind of jobs in big companies actually.
And I think that's another trend that we're seeing, is this more and more social entrepreneurship. And so that's something that's being encouraged by the French government, let's say.
Yeah, and you can raise funds for this kind of business in France today, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to be against the French government. I don't want to cancel motivation of entrepreneurs to launch their business in France. There is a lot of business angels and wealthy individuals that are looking for startups in France to invest 200,000, 300,000 euros to help the companies. But I'm seeing if you really want to have access to larger rounds, later on you have to go to London, because this is where the money is.
Amir?
Yeah, I would just like to follow on what Sven and Perrine are saying, basically about the French environment. I would like, and in this I would very much be in line with Sven. Anyone who is following this talk should think European, should think of Europe as one big single market, right? We know that, for instance, in the United States, for tax purposes, some entrepreneurs prefer to incorporate their company in Delaware, right? Because Delaware has some friendly tax system. But you operate, your market is everywhere. Your market can be in California, it can be in New York, but you are incorporating legally your company in Delaware for tax purposes, or for in Europe, for example. I agree with Sven. The money is in the UK, but the money is not from the UK. The money is actually coming from all over the world, including from continental Europe, and feeding those UK funds And if it takes incorporating in the UK to kind of provide some assurance to your investors, so be it. But your market would still be perhaps 80% of your market will be in France and or Germany. So I think we have in Europe now, we have to also internalize the idea that Europe is a big single market, and that entrepreneurs do not have to do everything within the same country. And this is, I think, also the value, perhaps, that the value of doing stuff in Europe, right?
Any other comments on that?
About seeing Europe as a market, I remember Xavier Niel, so the founder and general manager of or CEO of Free, was a conference. I think it was Le Web, and it was a conference or another conference. But you had entrepreneurs from the US, and what he said, the problem he had in France is that it was a not big enough market. So he would like to go to all Europe, but it's different languages, it's different laws, so he couldn't expand. But his business is very specific. It's telecoms, it's very regulated, and so on. So I'm not sure we can see Europe as a market. But on the other hand, Fabrice Cavarretta, who started Auckland, and I've been in contact with him, and what he says is that you have to start your website in different languages, and you don't know in which country is going to work. And Auckland, which was founded in Nice in southern France, worked in Spain and Italy. Yeah, so you don't know. You have to learn different languages, but that means more costs, that means more operations, and so on. No?
Not a big deal. I mean, those are transaction costs. When you have a viable business model, you really have a market opportunity, you have a viable business model. Those transaction costs, I mean, look, Matthieu, you're in Asia, and other people. Who are the people who approach Europe as a market? Those are the guys from Asia and from America. They see Europe as a market. And we in Europe tend to continue to see Europe as a set of 27 different countries. I have now, I see young entrepreneurs, creating companies, and from the outset thinking European, but you have maybe for practical purposes, you have to start somewhere. You start in France, or you start in Spain, or you start in Germany. But if someone who starts in France with Europe as the target would not approach the venture in the same way that as someone who starts in France with France as being the ultimate destination. So I think we have to. I'm not sort of de-emphasizing here or denying that that Europe is not the perfect single market that you can see, for example, in the US. But we are not too far from that. And if those barriers will not be removed until until a generational cohort of European entrepreneurs will try to cross them and lower them.
Just a point. So I think Hamid talks about the destination, the market, but if you look at the data, the supply of new firms within Europe, there's a huge variance. So I'm looking at the data from Lithuania, the number of new firms that come out of Lithuania, the number of new firms that come out of Italy, it's a huge difference. I think in Lithuania the number of new firms are about 19% compared to Italy, where it is close to 4% only. So Europe might be a single market, but the source of these new firms I think there's a story there. Where did they come from?
But you probably have the same situation in the United States. If you look at the
right.
position of, we talk about the Silicon Valley, right?
Yes.
Who talks about Missouri?
Or Wyoming.
Or Wyoming. So the thing is whether entrepreneurs are. I mean, personally, I would feel very happy if the new members of the European Union are supplying a new cohort of entrepreneurs who would take over or take advantage of opportunities of the single market. I wouldn't worry much if there's less supply of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, just wanted to emphasize that I'm not about being happy or unhappy, but just say that this is a trend. That's all.
What about the trend? I mean, there is a definite draw to emerging economies, and some say the West, in a certain sense, is losing the battle for talent. Can we say? Is this true to a certain extent?
Is a question to me, Sarah?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, I took a long story short, and I've been hearing this for some time, and well, if you look at the data again, you see that actually it's Africa which has been losing the war for, if it's a war at all. We have the war on cancer, the war on everything, right? So Africa has been losing on this war for a long time, right? I think more than, so let me look at the data quickly. I think more than 80% of some African countries have their graduates working in OECD countries. So it's not only just about rich countries, but I think poor countries kind of have lost if there is a battle at all for talent. Especially, I think, Africa and the Caribbean countries in particular.
Yes, Fabrice.
I mean, I think the entrepreneurship phenomena shouldn't be only viewed as a perfect market story, because I mean, even though I appreciate the argument that there are some areas where the barriers are going down and more things can be done across borders, but we should remember that it has been studied like that by quite a few scholars, that entrepreneurship is most often the result of a collective phenomena, very grounded. So there are a few industries which can go across, and the example by Sven telling us about Fabrice Cavarretta, he's doing an auction on the internet. Okay, there is no physical movement of things, there is the internet. So probably this is a very particular case if you think about it, because if you're doing restaurant or if you're doing any kind of things physical, quite frankly, the physicality, the environment is playing a big role. And I think we shouldn't be losing too much view of that thing. And so I'm back to your question, the question that you're asking now about the talent. It's the same for the talent. The talent is also embedded. So I don't think anyone can say to any graduate of a Western business school that it would be so easy to go to China. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you know, it will take you a lot of things to understand, a lot of embeddedness, finding a new social network, etc. It is very tricky. So I don't view the markets as being so much like, whoo, everything will move this direction, and then whoo, everything will move that direction, because this is where the opportunity is. There is some of it. I think we should always retain the idea that there's another phenomena, which is the old economic principle, you know, the Pareto principle. Each economy has got their things they do well and they can produce efficiently. And in that game, you know, Western countries still have some interesting play to do, but they do have some plays which would be stupid to do. So when I'm in my classroom, I tell my student guys, listen, if you want to compete with Chinese manufacturer on cost, yeah, sure, don't do it in France. Now, if you want to do a media play, a luxury play, food industry play, etc., quite frankly, starting in France is pretty nice, you know, because you got a lot of talent, you do have a great sophistication, and once you establish your firm in many of those industries here, well, then you can move abroad and you can start expanding. So we should really nuance, and I don't buy the story nowadays that any of my student classroom has to go to China. I really think that if they do that, a lot of them are going to be really damaged. They better think twice before they do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be nuanced about which industry, what is the value added, what you're actually doing. So in IT play, for instance, for sure it's somewhat easier to raise big rounds in London or in the US. But I did live in the US 20 years ago. I'm still in touch with the Valley a lot. I see a lot of good entrepreneurs. They started in Paris. Why? Because we do have good engineers. Now they're not perfect. Our engineers are not perfect, but they are pretty cheap. If you go to Valley and try to do your development in the Valley, good luck. Okay, it is very damaging to do your development in the Valley. And for French, just show up in the Valley and say, I'm going to do a round. I've got good ideas. Many people get damaged, and they don't talk about that because failure. You know, people assume that they are against the grain once they realize they made a mistake. B, they take it as a personal failure and therefore they don't claim. So no one will hear about the stories of people going to Valais or to London saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do things in London. And they get damaged because London is tough for a French person if you don't know the market. It's a very ruthless market. So I'll be nuanced about these like no barrier, open market, big movements. Okay, it's a way more subtle and grounded phenomenon.